everyone, this is Sarah, Painty Creator, and I'm just bringing you a bit of a video on a very small 12 centimetre square piece of paper. I don't buy these, I just cut them out, measure them, cut them out, and I've got a little bit of a horizon-y line, not too straight, on this lower third. So I'm going to spritz my paints, which are the Cotman watercolour paints. These are my paints that I use an awful lot, and I also have a set of Meeden mop brushes, squirrel mop brushes, synthetic ones, obviously not real squirrel hair, that are really beautiful to work with. They hold a lot of water and they come to a point well. And the other, lots of water, I have 2 jars of water, one for washing my brush and one for clean water when I need it, and plenty of this stuff, paper towel. And the paper that I'm using is Creative Peak. This works out at the moment, it's available on Amazon at around about 23p a sheet, which is brilliant, and I can get 2 of these size out of it, so that makes it really affordable. Good quality paper. You need 300 grams paper for any watercolour really, and well taped down. I'm just wetting the surface with some clean water, and we can have a bit of an adventure together. So I'm going to start with a little bit of Cad Yellow, quite watery, probably just above the horizon line for my sun. Quite translucent. I can always darken it up a little bit. I'm just going to add a little bit of Viridian red into here with some Cad Yellow. There's a nice orange. You can just use cadmium orange. And now I'm going to do that bit that was down near the bottom. Wanting to keep this damp, so my little spritzer bottle, really helpful for that. Just going to add some alizarin crimson into the mix, just to gradually warm up this sky. And then a touch of Ultramarine Blue. And just adding a little bit more Ultramarine Blue. I'm just going to add a touch of Indigo into that mix now. And some alizarin crimson just to mute it down a little bit. My sky is drying, so I want to keep that moving. A little bit more Ultramarine Blue and a touch of burnt sienna, or some red light, just to darken it a little bit. It's a bit too much. There we go. Remember, because we're working wet on wet, this sky is going to dry around about 30% lighter. Working on a board, so I can turn it around. That just lets gravity work. I've got a hard line formed here, so I'm just going to spritz that. I'm just going to blend in this end. And I'm going to let that dry as naturally as I can, patiently as I can. I'm just wanting that to spread that way a little bit. That's quite nice. I'm just going to pick out a little bit more of that sun. So, clean water, take the water off your brush and just then scrunch up a little bit of tissue. I don't want a proper circle, but I quite like it a bit brighter than that. I'm just going to brighten the edge with a little bit of gamboge yellow whilst it's damp. Just a damp brush to soften off some of those edges. Okay, so I'm going to allow that to dry. Okay, so here we are, we're back dry. Loving these little breaks in the sky. The sun's worked quite nicely. So I'm going to put on what is going to be the edge of the lake. So I'm going to just wet this area with some clean water and a soft brush. This is my medium mop brush, and I'm just going to wait for that water to soak in a little bit. I'm wanting the paper to be damp, not wet. So I don't want it running down the page, but I do want it to be able to be moved. So I'm going to mix some indigo with a little bit of burnt sienna or red light, whichever you've got, and some ultramarine. Because on an evening, oops, that's a lot of ultramarine. On an evening, the sea is, or the water is much darker. So I'm going to add more water to this one. So that's going to be lighter than the other, just because it's got more water in it. Okay, so the paper's now damp. So I'm taking the lighter mix, the one with more water. I'm just taking some of the paint out from my paper towel, and I'm just going to drop it across the horizon. And then I'm taking my thicker mix, the one that I mixed first, and just dropping some of that in across the Just working and playing with the water using those different mixes. And then I'm going to just let that dry naturally for a little while, and then I'll go in once it's dry with another layer of water. So I'm going to let that dry naturally. So here we are, we're dry, or dry enough. And as you can see, the sky and the sea are the same tone, and we don't want that. We need to have one darker than the other for the painting to work, because otherwise your eye becomes confused as to what to look at. So I am going to darken the sea, the lake, whatever it is, but before I do that I'm going to put on some distant sort of somethings on the shore side. I think this is going to be a lake. So for that I'm going to use some Paynes Grey with a touch of ultramarine. So Paynes Grey, if you haven't got it, is a black and ultramarine mix, and I just wanted this sort of darker, more neutral coloured grey. Let me just get my swatchy card. So it's a nice sort of neutral, and the ultramarine should come out of the mix in the same way. So I'm going to paint on some trees. Sorry, we're a bit wobbly today. I'm just going to lighten that mix with a bit more water in it, and I'm just going to add a touch of Cad Yellow. So I'm just stippling the tree shapes. Darkening with my mix as I go. Not real trees because it's a painting. I'm wanting it just to feel like there's a group of trees here. So it's just Paynes Grey and ultramarine. Doing whatever shape trees you think you would like. I'm pushing a bit more water into these so that it looks like We're potentially going further into the background. I'm sorry for the background noise, but we've got a wind tunnel working at the moment. Shut the window. Hopefully that will help. So that looks hopefully like it's going into a little bit of a distance within that. And a little bit more Paynes Grey and Ultramarine. I'm just going to darken some of these foregroundy trees. Just so they've got a little bit of a different tone going into that background area. Wash my brush, push it into the wash. A bit wobbly. There we go. It's something and nothing, but it will all be helpful in the end. Okay, so I've let that settle for a little bit. So I've got 3 or 4 different mixes of Paynes Grey and burnt sienna and ultramarine all together, similar to what we used for the sky. And so I'm going to be using those to just darken some of the sea. So I just put that horizon line on dry, and then I'm just going to wet the surface of my water. Put the horizon line on dry because that helps keep that separation nicely. So I'm just glazing on another layer of colour. So this is mainly ultramarine that I'm putting on at the moment. Remember, it's going to dry lighter. It's water. Just touching in the first sort of reflections. Because it's going damp into wet into damp, you get a nice sort of run of the reflections. And then I'm just taking my small flat brush, wet it, take most of the water out, just squeezing it between my hands, and then you can just lift off some ripples going through that shadow. We are going to do more. I'm going to darken that a little bit more. So I want to keep these lighter lines. I'm just picking up some thicker paint, some richer paint. Still with that blue-grey, same mix. So the paper's damp. I can strengthen some of those shadows, reflections, sorry. doing Indigo, Sienna, and a little bit of Ultramarine Blue for a fairly neutral dark colour. Just like that. Let the brush sort of dance over the surface. Don't want to obliterate the light that's there. And it will dry lighter. Strengthen that ripple. Sorry, I keep catching the brush on the camera because it's so low down. So I'm going to let that dry and have a look. But in the meantime, I'm going to put, where's my little rigger brush? There it is. Little number 0 rigger brush. Roll it around, get plenty of paint on, take the excess off on a paper towel. Let's put on some birds. So let's give that a chance to see how it's drying. Okay, I finished that one off with a hairdryer. So we are much drier. And I'm just getting my little flat brush. It's damp, so I've washed it, I've taken most of the water out. And just loading up using the same colours. I'm just going to strengthen that bank. And then using my mop brush, my rigger brush, sorry, just going to strengthen some of these reflections. Just using what's on my palette from before. Just a little wiggle. Getting lighter. That should be fine. Okay, still using my rigger brush. Just going to drop in some darker marks holding my rigger brush halfway down so that I'm not overly controlling. Roll the brush if you think you're not sure if you've got a nice coverage or you think you've got too much on. Just dab it on a paper towel. Okay, and then the last thing is I've lost a little bit of the light that was coming from this nice sun. So I'm just going to use a little bit of my Dr. Martens bleedproof white. So what I do is I just wet my brush and then drop it into the lid. I'm just going to let that white dance a little bit across the waves. Lovely. So rubbing it just pushes it into and dulls it into the paper and dulls it down for now. And then I can just put smaller, less defined bits on the water. The edge of these trees that are nearby. And then a tiny bit on the bottom of this bird. And I think that just lifts that little bit of sunlight. You can just drop a little bit in with some watercolour. So this is just yellow, Cotman yellow and the white mixed together, and it makes almost like a gouache. And I think that finishes that off quite nicely. So, hope you've had fun with that one. Let's just give it a rest and then I'll sign it, and then we'll have a look what it looks like when it's mounted in a little mount. There's obviously I need a different pen. There we go. And it's May 25. little bit of ink pen. So let's just get that into a mount. So here it is in its lovely little mount. I really like the sky. I like the grain texture. Look beautiful on a wall. So this mount is, let's just have a look, let's measure it. So the mount is 15 centimetres square. It's a lovely little mount for painting small, and painting small is really good for us when we are low in energy. And it's a lovely way of capturing some of our happy spaces. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and happy painting. Please drop me a comment or a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to, share with your friends. And I do have an online shop. If you'd like to have that link, please get in touch. It's been a pleasure sharing it with you.